Jackson Riker hadn't always been the kind of man to live behind gates. Once he was at the center of it all, founder of ArcNet Industries, architect of the sub-quantum processor, and one of the first to walk away from it all when AI governance crossed the line. Now he lived 37 miles outside the outer ring of Nova Hills, on a dusty ranch that looked deceptively primitive. Deceptive because his gate, weather-worn steel and pine on the outside, was laced with biometric sensors, grav-magnetic locks, and cloaking tech borrowed from one of his abandoned military patents. And it was this gate that set the scene for what should have been a quiet afternoon. The sound of electric tires crunching gravel broke the calm, followed by the hiss of a deactivating hover drive. Jackson was leaning against a fence post, polishing the scope on an old plasma rifle he kept more for nostalgia than defense. He didn't even need to look up to know who it was. Veronica Steele, the HOA president of Nova Hills, self-declared enforcer of community standards, guardian of regulated aesthetics, and, unbeknownst to her, tenant of the very man she was about to scold. Jackson Riker, she barked, stepping out of her car in polished heels entirely unsuited for dust or reality. You've got an unregistered structure on the northeast edge of Sector 6, and you've bypassed your mandatory drone inspections for the 4th time this cycle. He wiped the lens clean, finally lifting his eyes. Good afternoon to you. Too, Veronica. You can't just ignore the HOA directives, she said, stomping over to the gate. You agreed to community alignment standards when you reactivated your property node. No, Jackson replied calmly. I agreed to nothing. I never opted in. Your standards don't apply here. You're on the edge of sovereign land, not HOA jurisdiction. This was sovereign land. Then your section got merged into the district zoning when Nova Hills expanded. That gives the HOA access rights under Regulation Sigma 14. Check your maps again, he said, walking to the gate and placing his hand on the security panel. Your regulation ends 20 feet before this. Fence this gate, that's the line. She crossed her arms and tilted her head. If you've got nothing to hide, you won't mind me taking a look. You take one more step toward this gate and I'll shut it in your face. You wouldn't dare. A soft chime signaled her foot hitting the buried sensor pad on the ground. That was enough. Jackson tapped the console, and with a hydraulic hiss the gate swung inward and then slammed closed just inches from her face. Veronica stumbled back, flushed with anger and disbelief. You can't just... She fumbled for her wristband and activated the local enforcement channel. Code 17. Officer assistance requested. Unauthorized denial of public official access. Possible tech violations. Send units. Jackson folded his arms. Calling the cops? For trespassing? You'll see, Mr. Riker, you can't isolate yourself forever. The call went through and she turned, storming back to her vehicle, muttering into the wristband as her car spun up again. Jackson watched her go with a tired look. She had no idea. No idea who he was, what he was protecting, or what would happen if she ever did get past the gate. He walked back to his porch and looked over the valley. Beneath the serene grass and scrub trees of Sector 6 was the very reason he had come here in the first place, the buried node. It pulsed faintly now, underground, a residual echo from the failed ArcNet experiment, a pocket of folded spacetime trapped beneath the land. One misaligned energy source like an HOA surveillance drone or a zoning compliance bot, and the entire district could be sucked into a self-sustaining micro-reality loop, permanent, unreachable. He sighed. It wasn't arrogance that kept the eye gate locked. It was mercy. And now, because some overzealous bureaucrat with a taste for power and a complete lack of context had drawn the attention of authorities, things were going to get complicated. But there was something Veronica didn't know, something she hadn't yet realized about who truly owned her home, who signed the authorizations, and who controlled the neural access rights to the HOA's foundational smart grid. Jackson smiled faintly as he returned to his scope. This was going to be fun. The Nova Hills Authority responded in under 12 minutes, record time for what they assumed was a minor civil dispute. 2 patrol drones arrived first, sleek black spheres hovering silently over the ranch perimeter, scanning the gate with flickering blue optics. Moments later, a sleek enforcer vehicle, a Gravcar XR9, glided down the dirt road, kicking up a soft cloud of dust before coming to a seamless stop just outside the property line. Veronica stood at the edge of the gate, arms folded, eyes filled with smug satisfaction. She turned sharply as the enforcers emerged. Two figures clad in chrome exo-armor, faceless behind reflective visors, their neural command units synced directly to the HOA legal interface. I want him cited for obstruction, violation of regulation, Sigma 14, and unauthorized deployment of electronic countermeasures, she snapped before they could even introduce themselves. One of the officers raised a hand in a calming gesture. Ma'am, we'll conduct our own assessment before issuing any citations. Good, she replied. He's been dodging oversight for months. This property is a black hole on the compliance grid. Inside the ranch, Jackson stood at the window, sipping coffee from an old ceramic mug. Lyra, his AI assistant, hovered silently in the corner of the room. She took the form of a translucent woman in her early 30s, dressed in frontier-era attire. Jackson had a taste for irony. Her expressionless face flickered slightly as she processed the unfolding situation. They've brought autonomous arbitration units, she said, voice calm and modulated. Probability of escalation, 62%. Let them escalate, Jackson muttered, taking another sip. They're walking into a landmine of contracts they don't understand. Should I activate Protocol Warden? Not yet. Let's let them feel powerful for a few minutes. Outside, the drones completed their perimeter scan and pinged back encrypted data to the enforcers' headsets. One of them, Officer Helm, stepped forward toward the gate and tapped his command pad. Property owner, Jackson Riker. This land is registered under Riker Terra Holdings, Tier 3 sovereign domain. That's not standard HOA territory. Veronica's eyes twitched. That can't be right. That section was reclassified when the ArcNet Act dissolved. Negative, Helm interrupted. It appears the lease transition was never completed. Instead, this land was placed under a legacy sovereignty clause, protected by pre-ArcNet industrial immunity. Only the landlord of the Nova Hills development could have executed that override. Veronica blinked. That's impossible. The landlord is anonymous. The HOA board has been trying to identify them for 6 years. No one's ever responded. Jackson opened the gate just then. It creaked inward slowly, deliberate and heavy with meaning. He stepped outside, arms crossed, looking over the officers and then fixing his eyes directly on Veronica. You still don't get it, do you? He said, voice cool but edged. You're standing on land I own. Your house? Leased? Your boardroom? Powered by a grid I designed. Your entire neighborhood operates on infrastructure I built. And I've let you rent it all without ever asking for thanks. The silence was deafening. One of the officers adjusted his visor, clearly receiving. More data from Central Records. Confirmation received, he said hesitantly. Mr. Riker is the principal stakeholder behind Nova Hills' real estate fund. HOA charter is legally subordinate to landowner authority. Veronica's face drained of color. You're my landlord? She whispered. Jackson gave her a small, sharp smile, and I've been very patient. But patience has limits. Lyra's voice crackled through his wristband. Update. Internal HOA database is attempting to revise territorial definitions retroactively. Shall I lock them out? Affirmative, Jackson replied quietly. In the HOA command center hundreds of miles away, terminals suddenly flashed red. One by one, access nodes began shutting down. Digital locks sealed admin accounts. Zoning servers rebooted under foreign control protocols. And one name appeared repeatedly on their root control logs. J. Riker, Master Override. Back on the ranch, Veronica staggered backward a step, no longer the queen of order, but just another pawn in a game she never realized existed. I didn't know. No, you didn't, Jackson said. You thought power came from position, but real power is quiet, hidden, and it waits for moments like this. The officers gave a subtle nod, recognizing authority when they saw it. Without another word, they turned and returned to their vehicle. The drones retracted their optics and floated upward, vanishing into the blue sky. Veronica looked up at Jackson one last time, still trying to hold on to the shreds of control. "This isn't over." "You're right," Jackson said, stepping back through the gate. "It's just beginning." And then the gate shut again. This time she didn't dare try to open it. The night fell fast over the valley, casting long shadows across the quiet hills of Jackson Riker's ranch. Above, satellites blinked behind thin clouds, constantly feeding Nova Hills with surveillance data, utility tracking, and behavioral analytics. But over this property, just a few hundred acres, there was a dead zone. No feed, no metadata. Just silence. Inside his underground lab, accessed via an old barn with biometric locks disguised as rusty padlocks, Jackson stood before a massive interface screen. Lyra hovered beside him, displaying layered projections of geological strata, electrical lines, and hidden data streams running beneath Sector 6. "Activity spike detected in the nanotech vault," she said, her holographic eyes flickering. "Field instability at 1.3% and rising." Jackson narrowed his eyes. "That's too fast. The last spike took weeks to reach 1%. Something's changed." Lyra pulled up a 3D map, isolating a flickering red zone on the northwest edge. It intersected perfectly with the spot Veronica had mentioned earlier, the so-called unregistered structure she was so eager to inspect. "They've buried a new utility hub there," Lyra explained. "HOA retrofit, likely part of their smart compliance expansion program." "Damn fools," Jackson muttered. "They plugged a wireless quantum regulator directly into the anomaly. No shielding, no modulation. That tech was never designed for interference zones. Probability of containment failure now at 23.7%. Temporal flux signatures are appearing within 4 meters of the surface." Jackson rubbed his chin, pacing. "We need to stabilize the field before it syncs with the HOA smart grid. If it bleeds into their network, it won't just corrupt local data. It could trigger a cascading collapse of the entire city's digital infrastructure. That includes synthetic law enforcement, bio-ID registries, and the Nova Hills voting algorithm," Lyra added. Jackson stopped pacing and looked up. "They'll blame me. Frame me as some kind of rogue engineer if this thing explodes." "And if they access the vault directly?" Lyra asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped toward a console embedded in the wall and unlocked it with a retinal scan. Inside was a glowing orb, the ether core. It was a self-aware drone, one of his final designs before he vanished from public life, a prototype capable of spatial manipulation, real-time cloaking, and zero-latency defense. Jackson tapped the core, and it hovered into the air, unfolding silently like a mechanical flower. "We're activating you, Ether," he said quietly. "Perimeter defense mode. If anyone breaches the vault zone, warn them once, then contain." "Affirmative," the drone pulsed in response, speaking through a smooth, synthetic voice. Meanwhile, across town, Veronica sat in her minimalist condo, staring at her smart wall in silence. The images flickered between frozen HOA dashboards and a blinking message she hadn't dared to open for hours. It was an automated notification, sent from the Master Leaseholder Authority. "Your administrative permissions have been suspended, pending review by Sovereign Owner J. Riker." She replayed the moment again and again in her mind. Riker shutting the gate, revealing the truth, erasing years of assumed power with one sentence. She had run Nova Hills like a monarch, weaponizing code enforcement and neighborhood standards like tools of empire. And now, her empire was crumbling, pixel by pixel. Desperation brewed in her. If there was even a chance that Riker was hiding something bigger, something dangerous, she could still come out of this on top. If she could expose it, she could reclaim authority, maybe even rally the other districts. She stood up suddenly. Her wristband glowed as she activated the HOA emergency inspection override. "Engaging covert access," she muttered. "I'm going back." At the ranch, Jackson watched red markers appear on his perimeter scanner. Unauthorized biometric ID entering Sector 6. Lyra blinked. "It's her." Jackson sighed. "Of course it is." On the surface, Veronica moved carefully through the brush, guided by her wristband's navigation interface. She reached the edge of the red zone, the same area where the nanotech vault lay dormant beneath the soil. A soft hum vibrated the air, almost melodic like a machine dreaming. As she took another step forward, the ground pulsed faintly beneath her feet. And then, without warning, the ether core descended from above, silent, invisible until it chose to reveal itself. It materialized inches from her face, glowing with an eerie blue light. "Warning," it said calmly. "You are trespassing on sovereign land. This zone contains unstable temporal phenomena. Proceeding further may result in irreversible exposure to dimensional entropy." She froze, eyes wide. What the hell does that mean? From below, the ground emitted a low metallic groan. Jackson's voice came through the drone's speaker. "It means you're standing on the edge of something that shouldn't exist. And if you take one more step, you might become part of a timeline that never should have happened." The air shimmered around Veronica as the ether core hovered steadily in front of her, its warning still echoing in her ears. The blue glow pulsed with measured precision, almost as if the drone was breathing. She stared at it, not fully understanding what it was or why it spoke with Riker's voice, but knowing instinctively that it wasn't bluffing. The ground beneath her vibrated faintly, like something ancient was stirring just below the surface. "I'm not leaving," she said aloud, trying to muster confidence. "I have a right to be here. This affects the community." "You don't understand what you're standing on," Jackson's voice cut in again, sharper now. "Turn around, Veronica. This isn't a zoning violation. It's a fracture in time and matter itself. Your next step could trigger a collapse that consumes half of Nova Hills." Her wristband buzzed with an urgent system error. "Geospatial sync lost. Position unverified. Time drift detected." Then the light changed. For a split second, the landscape around her stuttered. Trees flickered in and out of existence. The stars overhead twisted into unfamiliar constellations. Her breath caught in her throat as she felt a cold rush pass through her chest, like she had stepped into a memory that didn't belong to her. And just like that, it snapped back to normal. She staggered backward. "What was that?" "You brushed against a breach zone," Jackson answered through the drone. "The vault underneath you is a failed experiment, a nanotech-based dimensional core. It was never supposed to activate, but when the HOA plugged their compliance beacon into the soil, it re-energized the field. You've been feeding it with every inspection drone and smart pole you install." Veronica shook her head slowly, trying to piece together the implications. This isn't possible. We regulate lawn heights and drone speeds, not quantum anomalies. Everything your HOA regulates runs on the infrastructure I left behind," Jackson said. "The smart grids, the satellite relays, even the encrypted municipal AI. You've been living inside a system built for something else entirely. You just turned it into a gated community." The ether core slowly moved aside, allowing her a clearer view of the earth beneath her feet. She noticed faint blue veins glowing just under the soil, like cracks in glass. A low-frequency hum vibrated through her bones. "I need to see it," she said suddenly. "The vault. If you're telling the truth, then I deserve to see what I've been walking over." There was silence. Then Jackson responded, "Very well, but you'll see more than the vault." A moment later, the ground beneath her began to shift, mechanically, smoothly. A perfect circle of land descended like an elevator, lowering her into the earth. The ether core followed, silently lighting the shaft as they dropped. Veronica clutched the handrail tightly, heart pounding. The soil gave way to metal. Metal gave way to glowing circuits. Then they stopped. Before her stood a sealed chamber shaped like a sphere, floating slightly off the ground, rotating slowly. Symbols, not human, glowed faintly across its surface. Lines of data streamed like flowing water around its shell. Inside the translucent shell, she could see particles frozen in chaotic motion, suspended in unnatural stillness. "This is the vault," Jackson said from the shadows behind her. He stepped forward, hands in his coat pockets. "The last remnant of Project Echo." "I've heard that name," Veronica whispered. Urban legend. Some kind of black-budget time experiment? Not a legend, Jackson replied. A prototype. It was supposed to allow remote observation of future probabilities, to predict crises, stock crashes, wars. But we pushed it too far. It started to affect the timelines, instead of just observing them. And you, what? Buried it under a ranch? I had no choice. We couldn't destroy it, and no lab was safe enough to contain it. So I buried it in sovereign land, shut down the company, and disappeared. Veronica turned toward him slowly. So why tell me now? Because now you're part of it, Jackson said. Your little HOA empire woke it up. It's adapting, feeding off the smart grid. And if we don't isolate it soon, it's going to rewrite reality in ways we can't predict. She took a deep breath. Then give me control of Nova Hills. Emergency override. Let me shut the grid down. Jackson raised an eyebrow. You'd surrender your authority? She hesitated, then nodded. If it saves everyone, yes. Jackson looked at her for a long moment. Then let's rewrite the leash. Jackson led Veronica down a second corridor branching off from the vault chamber, the metallic floor softly echoing under their footsteps. This hallway was different, less industrial, more personal. Old schematics lined the walls, printed on real paper, yellowed with age, handwritten notes scrawled in the margins. Veronica scanned them as they walked, recognizing formulas and diagrams that would have baffled even the highest-tier HOA engineers. These weren't the blueprints of a rancher or landlord. These were the relics of a man who had once redefined reality and then buried it. Where are we going? She asked cautiously. To finish what I started, Jackson replied. You want control of the grid, the override key to shut it all down. It's here. But I need you to understand something before I give it to you. They arrived at a vault, or not a digital portal but a physical one, massive and cold with an old-fashioned wheel lock at its center. Jackson placed his palm against a hidden panel, and the entire mechanism hissed and swung open, revealing a chamber unlike anything Veronica had ever seen. Inside, a massive server array stood humming softly in a dome of mirrored walls. Blue and gold lights pulsed gently along data lines that snaked through the ceiling like neural pathways. At the center was a chair, a simple high-backed seat surrounded by floating control nodes. This, Jackson said, is the core interface. Veronica stepped closer, transfixed. This controls the grid? Jackson nodded. More than that. It controls the Nova Hills infrastructure. Power flow, digital governance, zoning AI, surveillance feeds, even citizen sentiment tracking. Everything your HOA has been wielding like a cudgel was filtered through this system. Why would you give me access to it now? She asked. Because you've already stepped too far to turn back, he said. You've seen the vault. You've touched the breach. The core's been watching you, evaluating your choices. If I shut it down alone, it might resist. But if someone the system has already begun syncing with takes control, we have a chance. Veronica hesitated. You mean it's alive? Not exactly, but it's responsive. Sentient enough to protect itself. Think of it like a distributed nervous system. It doesn't think the way we do, but it understands threats. It responds to intent. She looked down at her hands. They trembled slightly. If I sit in that chair, what happens? You'll be connected directly to the core's logic pathways. It will try to merge with your decision-making processes. If your focus isn't strong, you'll lose yourself in it. The core doesn't distinguish between you and your intentions. It will make your thoughts real. That's how the vault was activated in the first place. By accident, by curiosity. Veronica took a step back. So you want me to will the system to sleep? Yes. Guide it into hibernation. Sever its link to the smart grid. Once that's done, I'll rewire the interface to permanently lock it out of civilian infrastructure. She looked at the chair, then at him. And if I fail? Jackson's voice was quiet. Then it wakes up completely, and we lose our reality, one timeline fragment at a time. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Veronica stepped forward. Then let's do it. She sat in the chair, and the core came alive. The room dimmed. Gold and blue filaments wrapped around her wrists, her temples. The control nodes floated toward her like sentient birds. Her eyes widened as data poured into her mind. Not just numbers and interfaces, but emotions, colors, memories that weren't hers. She could feel the neighborhood, feel Nova Hills pulsing beneath her fingertips. Every thermostat, every car, every surveillance drone and smart trash bin. It was listening. She focused. Thought of peace, of silence, of stillness. But it resisted. A surge of pressure hit her brain like a wave. She saw flashes of alternate versions of herself, older, younger, crueler. In one, she was still HOA president, declaring martial law. In another, she was homeless, forgotten. The core pushed all of it at her, trying to find the version it could follow. But she kept her focus. No authority, she whispered aloud. No control, just rest. The lights pulsed faster. The chair vibrated. Jackson stepped closer, ready to intervene, and then suddenly, quiet. The lights dimmed. The filaments withdrew. Veronica opened her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. It's done. Jackson exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. He tapped his wristband. Lyra's voice responded instantly. Core has entered full dormancy, grid desync complete. Jackson looked at Veronica. You did it. She stood slowly, her voice hoarse. I don't think I'll ever be the same. He nodded. None of us will.